everybody, and thank you so much for being with us today. It's pretty exciting to see many faces that are familiar and some that are new. We have people in the room who are customers of Dust, people who are trying us out and trying to make their minds up, and people who are just curious about the ways in which to deploy Gen AI in their companies and across teams. So hopefully you all get to discuss those various stages of discovery, excitement, trough of disillusion, plateaus and spikes. What's exciting to me, by the way, I'm Gabriel, I'm CEO and co-founder of Dust, is just to think about how different everything feels today versus a year ago. We held a similar session for leaders and decision makers on this topic a year ago, and there were very few people who had already deployed it internally at their companies. And now I'm just going to try and take a quick poll, but raise your hand if there is some form of usage of Gen AI in your company today. Yeah, feels pretty different. And so maybe we're going to have to hold these every quarter to just keep up with what's new and exciting. We'll see. But it's my pleasure to have with me today a couple of leaders of companies that have decided to embark on this journey of transformation in a really ambitious way. Claire, the CTO at Malt, and I'll let her introduce herself a little more with a few questions and prompts. And Stéphane, AI transformation expert, is that your actual?
Yeah.
All right, AI transformation expert at Qonto, one of the leading fintechs that we have here in France. So the goal for the conversation is to spend roughly 40 minutes talking about things that are working, things that are not working, hopefully not too many things that are not working, you see. Questions that you have as leaders looking at the months, the quarters and the years ahead, and the impact that you think it's going to have on your business, but also on your teams. And I'll start, first of all, with just a quick recap for us. This year has been one of growth and discovery. We're really happy to be working across continents with leaders here, 2 on stage, a few more in the room, companies across industries, Doctolib, to name one in the healthcare space, and other fintechs like Penny Lane. And also smaller companies moving very fast. Clay, that some of you may know as product, uses Dust internally. Cursor, that some of you may have heard of, is also one of the companies working with us. So across these sizes, one thing seems to be a common thread, and it's the mindset with which these teams are approaching this problem, really believing that the transformation is going to be deep and that it needs to really involve the teams to reach its full potential. Okay, that's enough of me talking. I'm going to ask you both to give a quick intro of your roles, the companies that you work for, and the stage of AI deployment that you feel you're at right now. Claire, why don't you kick it off?
All right. Malt, if you don't know about it, it's a leading freelancer marketplace in Europe. So it's about 800,000 freelancers on one hand, 100,000 businesses on the other hand, really marketplace where we match companies with independent talent. So a big part is the HR tech aspect, the matching, I do all of that, integration with big corporation third-party tools. And there are also fintech challenges around compliance, cross-border payment, taxes, invoices, all different topics. And I've been CTO for a few months. Before that, I was leading the data and machine learning team. That's mostly what I've been doing for the last 2.5 years in the company.
In one sentence, could you maybe describe the stage that you feel AI deployment is at, both in terms of usage and maybe also in terms of impact, if you have a way to feel like
Yeah, on one hand, I want to answer day one. It feels like we're just getting started. On the other hand, when I compare where we were, just 3 months ago or just 1 year ago, I feel like it's been just growing exponentially. A few stats, 2/3 of the employees use Dust actively in the week. But it hides a lot of heterogeneity. You have teams which are 100% with really depth of using AI in their day-to-day, in their workflow, 50 times a day. And that's a few teams, like the product team is really at 100%. And you have teams where we're still closer to zero. it's recorded, so I will not, I will not make him. But I say, until recently, it's been really a move both bottom up, and we can talk more about like how we went about it, but with AI champions in each teams, enabling them outside of the tech team to not be a bottleneck, and transversal, like me pushing as a head of data machine learning and now institute pushing the other teams. It's been a few weeks since we also now have a top-down mandate. Actually, I shared the adoption of Just as a proxy of AI acculturation and some other tools we use in a COMEX recently, and that led to a more top-down push of the company. So it's very useful to have the stats.
Awesome, thank you very much. Stéphane, why don't you give us a bit about Qonto? And
So I'm Stéphane. For those who don't know Qonto yet, we are a business finance management solution for SMEs and freelancers, serving more than 500,000 customers across 8 countries in Europe. We have broadly 1,600 employees, and right now we have about the same stats, like 2/3 of us are using this on a daily basis. That's the easiest stats we get because we just have the number in the dashboards. But we start to see also other tools deployed for some verticals usage. And in terms of strategy, we were discussing with Claire just before, it's quite similar. So we started with a bottom-up approach where we had AI advocates, so the champions that you mentioned, one in each department, at least one, mainly based on their enthusiasm and like their willingness to explore the tools and stuff. And about 2 weeks ago now, we also have a top-down approach where it became from like a nice to have, like we encourage you to explore, to more like a must-have. So a big shift also for the organization, because now we also need to deploy more infrastructure in terms of support, training, and stuff for the contours.
Yeah. Who here is familiar with Toby's memo? Toby, the CEO of Shopify, and the memo that he shared. So one of the sentences that I think helped move parts of the ecosystem from the early adopter to the early majority segment was really this sentence, like, reflexive AI usage is now an expectation of employees at Shopify. And I'm hearing more and more teams where leadership is coming up with a version of that and saying it's no longer about potentially discovering it, it's about challenging yourself to redefine your role and exactly how you fit in the company thanks to these new tools. And I think we hinted at some of the ways in which you feel like deployment can be done, bottom up, top down, but also which tools to choose, horizontal, vertical. So I'd like to maybe spend a few minutes on that topic. First of all, on the question of how your companies are approaching the build versus buy decisions on the broad topic of Gen AI tooling for your companies. Maybe Claire, do you want to start with that?
Reflecting on that, because 2 years ago, I think we were really just building our first assistant, a classic RAG, so connecting an LLM to internal documentation on Notion. And it was obvious that we would build it. Why? Because we had machine learning engineer, ML ops. We knew how to do it because the product is heavy on ML. And actually, quickly we realized we should not do that. So we managed to get a good assistant. It was called product knowledge. Really, like the product is very complex because you need to understand who is our financing partner in Germany, what are the, what does it take to be a compliant freelancer in Spain? Like onboarding on Malt, like takes a lot of time. And so people were spending a lot of time on Slack answering questions. It was obvious that there was a need, and that would be a great first use case. We built it, and then my senior ML ops told me, Claire, it's going to take some time to maintain the connector, and then, we will want to test this LLM, that other LLM. Look, we have 100 ideas of assistant we could do. You're going to need to hire a lot of people next year. ML engineer, ML ops. Like, I'm not seeing the wind going this direction in terms of spending, right? 2024. So it's obvious we need to find another approach. And that's when actually I remember the email from your co-founder saying that the plugin, on Chrome was depreciated, but you were launching this new platform. Like, this is exactly what I need. I was like, okay, let's set up a call and see if we can, if I can solve that problem. And in a few minutes, we replicated the assistant we had built, but with nearly zero maintenance costs. So that was obvious we would take the buy approach to really help us scale. Now, having a platform, it was not the reason why, but we also saw that it really benefited with the acculturation. That's what you were asking about. And having people build their assistant, non-tech people build their assistant, I think it's enormous value also of the process that I would not have had built that with the tech team internally. And I think that's probably is a much more powerful argument than the initial one. The more I see that spreading through the organization.
And I presume the engineers that you have on the ML team are all still very busy building AI stuff, but for the actual product that is Malt. Is that?
Exactly, because you're always building the next thing, and there's so much to build on top of what other people are building in the company.
Yeah. Stéphane, how does build buy work at Qonto?
So we took the same path, but not for the same reason. Initially, it started quite small, more like as an experimentation, and it didn't come from the data team. So they were looking for, I say they because I wasn't part of the project at the moment, but they were looking for tools that were easy to set up and that were accessible to non-tech people. And as you mentioned, being able to give that tool to non-tech people in all the teams of the company without having the tech team being a SPOF, it's really valuable. And I think that's also a choice that we did, like consciously, it's to buy so we can move faster and experiment. So yeah, and now with a bit of insight, we start to see that for more deeper use case, more custom use case, we start to build our own. But having definitely like buying this horizontal tool allowed us to move faster and to start with.
So usage by non-technical people seems like it was a criteria when you were reviewing the possible options. Were there any other key criteria that you think were important to bring up when you looked at possible solutions, or when you still look at other possible solutions to equip the team?
I think the versatility, like being able to adapt assistance to specific use case for each team, because like at Qonto we are like 1,600, and I don't know how many different jobs we have, but like each of them have their specific requirements. Some of them, like nowadays, a lot of them come from like automation, like taking tasks that we're already doing, but with a lot of different criteria and requirements. So giving them that possibility, definitely.
Yeah, a few more for us as well, and I would say that's the same for every like buy decision. Actually, the cost, also the level of control and the understanding of what was the underlying technology. Especially when it comes to AI, large language model, the fact that a part of the product is open source was super important. The quality of the team, and that was super key actually internally for the tech team. I remember a person in my team doing, I think, a pull request on the code, but then we realized you were actually moving so fast, actually it was not even something we would have to worry about because the team was really cracking and developing features much faster than we were needing. So these were some of the aspects. I think it's a particularly important question now, and when you decide, which third party you're going to buy and integrate, like understanding what's underneath and who is building it.
One of the questions that I think a lot of people have is also around how to think about horizontal deployment internally and vertical use cases that might be used by one function. So at Dust internally, we're 35 people, but everybody uses Dust, of course, but the engineers also use cold code or cursor. How do you think about the advantages or, again, the decision framework around the versatility of a horizontal platform, the use cases where vertical might make most sense? Stéphane, do you want to?
So for us, as the adoption grew, I think initially people just wanted to try. They were not familiar with the tools and stuff. So chatbot assistant were really accessible. It's the first thing. I think everybody knows or heard about ChatGPT and tried even in their personal life. So that was the first bite. And then as they get more familiar, people started to be like, oh, actually, I want more of this. And then the new challenge became, I don't want to context switch, or I want to go deeper and access, for example, more data. Let's say the finance team, maybe they need to access data that are not made available yet through Dust, or like people team that are doing interview all day long. they want to somehow find a way to link and leverage LLMs and GenAI tools directly with their existing tools. And that's something that I saw also, like, I think over the last 12 months, more and more tools that we were already using that are nothing to do with GenAI started to pop GenAI features or additional pack plans about GenAI. So that's where maybe when they want to specialize, they go more into verticals. But I guess it depends on the use case.
I mean, they are super complementary, the vertical one and the platform. I think with a vertical tool, you get a productivity boost for an entire function, like as you roll this out and get adoption. For example, in the sales team, we're implementing Mojo, not just for like the recording transcript of calls, but also the ease of searching, doing data analysis, reviewing and whatnot. And I think rebuilding that today, it's a bit too costly. I think maybe 1 year, 2 years from now, we can revisit. It just provides a lot of value as one go. Same, I think, on the engineering side, you have, we have tools that we are whitelisting, saying it's okay to use, but people can trust a lot more, like new coding assistant, because it's moving super fast also, right? After a security review or not. And I think it gets you the increment of a nice productivity boost, but it doesn't get people to be agents of shaping their workflow of tomorrow. I think this is really what at stakes right now and in the coming years. It's like you have non-tech people who are thinking about, hey, what product could I build? Now, I'm not a product person necessarily, but what product could I build that will make my life easier? And I think this is what the platform is about. So even for an engineer, they may use a Cursor or IntelliJ AI or whatever. But what I like is for them to think about, hey, let's build an assistant actually to automatically review the PR or merge requests, depending on what tool we use. Or maybe every week we have an assistant that's going to scan, the code of this team and propose refactoring, or an assistant for security issues. Or a migration. I know we're doing migration, everything to Postgres. You design a specific assistant for your workflow, and then so on and done. And I think this is that type of thinking that maybe the vertical tools don't get you to do. But I think that's super key. That's how you get your team to really be empowered to be actors of their workflow tomorrow.
We shipped a feature today, and I saw one of the people on the customer success team call an agent that was called Voice of Customer and said, can you just list all the customers that have mentioned wanting this feature in the calls over the last 30 days so I can just email? And it was a use case that I hadn't thought about. I was using it the other way around by saying, hey, I'm thinking about this feature. Can you find me calls where people are going to challenge my thinking and do customer discovery? But using it as a way to prioritize your product updates with fun things. I really like the transversal nature of some of the agents that are being built too. Okay, practical deployment strategies. People want to know. So let's start with you, Stéphane. I've got a question for you. What would be some factors that you think can really accelerate deployment? If your singular goal is to try and get to deeper, valuable usage across more users, what strategies have you put in place that you think have been good? And maybe who are the AI champions that we need to identify or hire or elevate in our teams to help with that?
So I think the key ingredient is probably understanding what AI can do or not. And that's one of the things we saw when we had AI champions in each teams. The ones that were more techy and got a better understanding of the limitation and what we can do or not, what is good or not. So I'd say probably training and trying to reach this AI fluency kind of.
What kind of fluency do they need to know? When do you feel like you're comfortable enough having them become a champion?
So for us as a payment institution, for example, we have a lot of regulations and stuff. The first thing we did is to provide clear guidelines as a framework of what you can do, what you cannot do. So that's the first point, I think. Then it's to open channels for support. Obviously, we started with a small team, like a core team, and trying to spread it. So I would say understanding the technology, the boundaries, what you can do, what you can't. And also one key thing that has nothing to do with GenAI, I think it's to first start from real-life business problems, not to try to just do AI for the sake of it. And I think for all of you in the room, you already know what are the pain points, what are the problems that you're trying to solve. And then it's just a matter of like trying to match with the awareness of what the technology can do or not, what will be the good use case, and where you will get the best return on an investment.
What about you, Kat? Any adoption strategies that you want to share with the room?
For me, maybe there's 3 steps. I don't know if it's the right formulation. That's the one I have in mind. And it depends on the level of maturity. Step 1, identify and empower your champion. Tell the story of the ROI and the impact of the first wins. And then you have to tackle the followers. There's 2 steps there. I think it's like train, show example. I was actually very surprised initially that people get stuck on the use cases, lack of ideas. And actually you have a small percentage of people that have a ton of ideas. Majority of people will be followers. So you have to facilitate that. We created an AI university, for example. I think having access to managing the community. I think we're formalizing a role maybe to handle and feed this community and nudge. And I think step 3, it's the phase we've entered, which is at some point it has to become a company priority. You need to have the sponsorship of management. It has to be a team conversation, a manager conversation with a report. And you need that sponsorship to make time for it, right? It's probably 3 phases.
Yeah. I think the leadership's message can also really help in making sure that people understand that there's an expectation of discovering and adopting some of the tooling, but that it is not necessarily with the goal of automating everybody or everything. We definitely had some customers where the messaging initially was maybe not clear enough, and people were like, well, if I tell you it works, do I still have a job? And so specifically on the teams that are still growing fast, or where you have team members that you trust, it's more about communicating, hey, we just want you to not do these things because there's other things that we need you to do, and how we build the company going forward is going to be helpful. So I guess the top-down message there is really going to be quite helpful. Did you have adoption goals when you started off? Did you you mentioned 2/3 of the team using it regularly, Qonto and some. Were there targets? Do you think it's good enough? When do you think you'll be happy? What's a great target for the end of the year?
So far as in 2024, we did set an OKR on this. This was because deployed for everyone, it was our easiest proxy to try to figure out how much of the people are using GenAI. So our goal was 70% on weekly basis. We've reached it. Now we went a bit lower, but also I think it's explained because we now have more tools and some people are switching from those to others. And we don't track all the tools yet because not all the platforms and tools have these capabilities.
Yep.
Yeah, never at company level. It's probably I set goals with myself initially, and we were more acting like that. We need to find, identify the 1 or 2 champion per team. We know that was the first goal we had, and then we need to have that community who reach 40 people, we're 600 employees, just so you get a sense of the ratio. And now it's we have the formalized stage of maturity of this pyramid, and we mapped actually the percentage of employees, and so we have goals per level of maturity to move people by the end of the year that we presented to the COMEX. But it's still I would say goals I'm carrying. We haven't translated that into a company objective, so it's been more we've taken some of the elements of Toby's messages, but not all of them. Yep. So still working through what objectives we've got there. But I think more importantly, for me, the goal is for every employee to realize that this is an opportunity for them. That's something that's really telling the story of the why, more than an OKR. Mm-hmm. That's really the message we're trying to get through. Why it's important for them to invest.
Some of the North Star metrics for us are sort of deep and valuable usage of the tool. I think that if we're being used and rated as what we feel we should be adding value on, it's like a vanity metric where we start kidding ourselves. So I think about at least 4 levels of usage of this. So level 1, I'm interacting with a state-of-the-art model and I'm asking it questions, I'm using its internal knowledge, and I can get great ideas for a trip to Paris. Level 2, I'm customizing that state-of-the-art model to a specific use case, and that system prompts, even if people do it in ChatGPT, that the notion that you can have different workflows associated with specialization and that you don't need to give it the context every time. Level 3, I'm using internal data. I'm connecting it to data flows that may be either queried just in time or that have been built up over time. And I think that level 4 is the agent level, where you're going to be using these as part of doing things, and so the actual doing the thing at the end is part of the flow. And monitoring them, and I think seeing people move on and going from level 1 to level 2 to level 3, and then hopefully level 4 as quickly as possible is pretty exciting. Okay, challenges, risks and surprises. People want to know what's going to go wrong. There's always the notion of measuring what usage you're getting. What was the company's position on shadow AI, trying to understand what was already being done, thinking about how data was being shared with the models? What were your concerns when you started looking at solutions like Dust or others, and how did you feel you had to sort of act because of the risks that were existent at the company? Feel free to cut out if you have ideas. You can use that.
Yeah, several. It was not the driver. We're driven by value, but it's true that shadow AI was a big concern, and it's still a big concern, something actually we did create metrics on. Obviously, we encourage experimentation, but with a security review first, which we try to make very rapidly. Because even if you train people, and it's how we tackle it, to not use certain tool, use it a certain way, and it may still happen, but that's a real risk for us, especially given the trust some large companies put in us or some of the freelancers. People are very sensitive to this question. So security, data leakage, all these use cases. And that matters also in the choice of platform you're going to make. Another challenge we've seen that slows down the adoption, you have your early adopter, your followers, you're also people who push back. I don't know how many companies have that, but there are people who push back on AI for different reasons. Carbon footprint, all good reasons. Huh? The way it's trained, ethical reason, all sorts of issues. And so that's why we don't have OKRs on this. OKRs, 100% of people should test. We don't push adoption. We want people to actually understand and master the technology, and then use the best tool for the use case. But yes, I think identifying that you have people who are going to push back, there are these voices. I think it's also another risk you have sometimes for the adoption.
How do you communicate simply the benefits of having maybe a more centralized approach to data connection to models? Some people don't have the time to read terms of service of using ChatGPT for free versus using a company account versus using an API access via a platform like Dust. What did you feel were messages that got it across, what the risks for the company were to go, shadow IT versus an actual authorized route? Any messages that you felt were simple and effective?
For us, I think one of the main things, not only because of the message, but just the availability of the data. I think the key for usage of LLMs is to provide them the right context. And we have a handful of tools that we mainly rely on for our operating system, like Notion, Slack, Google Drive. That's the main one. And usually when you need to connect your LLMs or your tools, you need admin permissions on those, like for Notion, for example. So that was already, and at the time, other tools like ChatGPT and stuff didn't have those capabilities. So I think naturally, people were turning to Dust.
Because of the value, because
yes,
they were getting...
Exactly. And the second thing was the framework that we set with the guidelines of clear, it was 3-4 bullet points of this you can do, this you cannot do, like customer data, etc., etc. And then the relay with the champions in each department also really help, because it's always easier to reach out to someone that you know already, that you used to work with, instead of going to find someone that you never interacted with.
Yeah, one thing we did that helped is we branded it.
Okay.
I think it's always cool actually with tech project to find a name, brand it, because then people know how to talk about it. And so we call it Malt AI. It has its own logo from the brand team. And then it's how we market it. It's like an internal ChatGPT that is also connected to company data. People got it, and they know they can. We have a few generic, actually, assistants that are covering some of the use cases of ChatGPT, because there's still a lot of generic use cases. And we worked a lot on how do you access this different assistant on Slack and navigate the multiplicity of assistants at some point. I think when you're successful, you get to another challenge, which is so many assistants, and how do you navigate that? And so an orchestra assistant is typically, I think, the way several companies go. So we did that. But yeah, branding I found was also helpful. People knew how to talk about it.
How do you keep track of the new models? Which one's best at what? Why you think it might be valuable to have access to different ones for different things? Where do you get your juicy information on what's best for what?
To be honest, I don't. It's a lot of people try and learn. Now we start to have some trends, for technical task coding and stuff, we go to our cloud. For more creativity stuff, we go toward GPT models. But it's a lot right now because of the community that we also created. I think to give you numbers, we are around 650 on the Gen AI channel internally, out of 1,600. And there was no one single day without people posting and telling, hey, this is what I did, and this is what I use, or sharing tips, or this didn't work. It happened as well.
Yeah, those things
happen organically.
Yeah. I don't know if it's bad, but I don't care as much.
Okay.
Honestly, I think when there are really step changes, you see them anyway on your LinkedIn or wherever you spend your day on. It's very obvious, but what I care most about is that people, when they build their own assistant, experiment, with different models, state of the art and whatnot. But I think, honestly, there's a lot of noise. There are a lot of marketing-driven noise. So, yeah, I don't care as much.
It's interesting. It goes back to the Jeff Bezos quote, you have to care about what's going to change a lot and also what's not going to change at all in the next 5 years to think about your strategy. And I always kind of A/B test on at least two models just to get a sense, but I don't do a very quantitative evaluation of all of the options. All right, use cases, ROI, and maybe talking a little bit about some of the exciting stuff coming with Model Context Protocol, MCP. Okay, so how did you think about prioritizing and identifying use cases, empowering people to come up with them, and maybe some examples of high-impact use cases that you think are really driving the understanding that others have, okay, this is possible, and it brings value, and everybody's happy about it. Anybody wants to start?
I'll go ahead. We basically took the easiest approach. We tried to identify use cases that were simple, that we would know well, the problem, we knew how to solve it already. Things that happened a lot, like repetitivity. And we tried to see if AI would help with this. And it was the case for a lot of automation tasks. For example, in our business flow too, when a customer opened an account at Qonto, we need to process, to check their identity, who they are and stuff, KYC, KYB. And that's a lot of repetitive tasks where customers send documents. Human used to go through all of them to extract, out of 5 pages, just 2 or 3 information. So those are typically the tasks that work well with Gen AI. And because of the volume, that's where the ROI skyrocket.
Yeah, I'd say 2 phases. I think there's different ways to deploy the platform. We went more use case by use case, not opening it to every employee, which can be another approach, right? Depending on what's the level of urgency you want to put. But the first use cases were so ROI positive that it was not even a question afterwards. So I talked about the product feedback, customer care. We had the level of agents now. We have massive impact very fast. It did impact our forecast on how much we should increase the capacity last year over the summer. We reduced our capacity planning by half. We have different level of severity. I think it's a use case everybody has been working on, but our level 0, level 1 tickets, we're still not comfortable with having the agents sending the email, so there's still a short review. But it really decreased the time spent on this by 80%, 90%, depending on the level. What I focused more on, so I don't review the use case saying prioritize them, or I was mostly worried about making sure that we are equipped to empower, to support all the use cases possible, that we create a framework around evaluation. What I wanted to make sure about is that we build as a tech team the tools to say this is how we're going to score and compare assistants, so we can see which ones are the highest ROI, because it's really like the life of products. Some are created and they explode, and then they may, actually be used by everybody all the time, or they're going to die down, and then you need actually the muscle to kill them. It's more, how do you manage the lives of many, many products, internal products, and focusing more on the frameworks, and not caring as much about the ROI ex ante, but holding people accountable afterwards, so that you have some form of a governance, if you wish.
Yeah, I think the governance side, when I pitch Dust, I generally say it's about designing, deploying, and then maintaining, because I think in a few years' time, people are going to be wondering, like, is this still up to date? Does this still actually fulfill the business value or business objective that it was designed to do? And who's responsible if it doesn't? So making sure that agents are still somehow mapped to the teams or the organizations that are going to be responsible for actually deciding if they still bring value to the team.
In mass impact, I think projects, it's more like there's projects I would have said no to, and the assistant made them possible. Certain migrations, I was mentioning migration to Postgre, other things like that. You really see the time you have to dedicate to it being much, much faster, much less. So I think it's also how you can measure the ROI, and maybe I'll stop there. I'm happy to. We have so many examples. I think this is where it's hard to know what may provide value to other companies.
And so we have a pretty open community on Slack where builders tend to share their stories, their discoveries. I'm always amazed to see how open it is, because again, it goes back to very different functions, very different stages of maturity, but a similar mindset. Exploratory, pretty confident with trying things out, thinking generally transversely, plugging things together that used to be like disjointed business processes, and thinking, actually, the LLM can do the glue here, so I think we can try something out. When Stan and I started the company, one of the things that made me click on LLMs, as my co-founder was at OpenAI for 3 years before we started Dust, and I have to say, the first time he showed me GPT-2, I didn't understand what it was about and why it was great, because it was gibberish and it was just creating words, and it had none of the reinforcement on human feedback, so it was like not conversational yet. It didn't really stop. But then understanding that it was really good at repackaging information on the fly and making technical information non-technical, extracting data from a table very quickly, that sort of felt like the magic that was going to be our potential. And that was just in the conversational or the retrieval stage. But I think one of the new things that people are hearing more and more about is obviously the agentic stage. So we made the decision earlier this year to switch the naming of assistants from assistants to agents, and one of the reasons for that was that they were starting to have capabilities, at first very modest capabilities. Hey, instead of just answering, generate the document that is going to answer, or instead of answering, create the draft in Zendesk or in the application that I'm using. And now with Model Context Protocol, so the MCP stands for this protocol that is really going to allow LLMs to interact with applications. And so they will be provided with rules of interaction, such as authentication, rate limits. And I think that what we're seeing is a very fast adoption of the ability for any app to expose itself to agents, whether internally or externally. Stéphane, I maybe had a question for you. I know you've been thinking about the potential impact at Qonto. So what are some of the use cases you're looking at? What are the things where you feel most optimistic about MCP?
The first thing I see is MCP give LLMs the availability to act like we would. Like before, for example, if the data that I had in an app like Figma that we use internally for visual spec had no connections to Dust, I would have as a human to go get the data, copy, paste it, give it to them. So it already kind of drive the answer or the data that they can look at to answer to me. Now it's completely different. We can just plug it and we just tell our LLMs, okay, here are the tools you have access to. Use them if you need to complete this kind of task. So we give boundaries and expectation, and then they can just think of, oh, okay, they asked me to do like something about that visual spec. I need to retrieve it, get the data, give you the answer. So it's like basically crossing the limits that were there before.
We see this as like really contributing to the productivity conversation. So doing things faster or cheaper, doing things at a higher quality bar, so responding to support tickets in a language that you don't speak, but making your customer happier for having gotten a response that they understand, and then sometimes doing things that you would not have been able to do. So as this sort of landscape changes, one of the questions I had maybe for you, Claire, is also, how do you bring in like employee satisfaction, and how they derive meaning from designing these agents and seeing a future where they may be collaborating with humans and agents? Is that something that you have as a metric or as a goal, or that you're thinking about?
Yeah, I'm really not a fan of the speech, when we position agent on the same line as an employee. And for me, it's really much more transversal. It's like something that's simplifying your team, your function. And I think people, it's much better. I think they approach it better when we don't put them at the same level. There's like sometimes we say AI is your new employee. I think it's not as helpful actually to get people to interact with new technology in this meaningful way. But for example, customer care. I'm not sure you don't necessarily need MCP to build agent, by the way. I think if you take a definition of agent from the 90s, there were already agents in the 90s, like a Clippy web crawler. They have action, they can take some action and whatnot. I think you can build agent with some APIs, right? And workflow. I think MCP it's new possibilities on top of APIs. And I think we're still finding asking ourselves when to just use API, when in MCP meaningful. I think for payment and authentication, there's real values, and that's something we're moving on the product side. And so internally on customer support, for me, the agent, it's very interesting, and it's a team proposing, let's actually build a capacity to take first level of action. And that means we're working a lot of the way we expose information or think about admin to resolve a payment that is blocked, or something that just will require pushing a button here and whatnot. It doesn't bring a lot of meaning to employees. And so you could think first that discussing about AI and agents is going to trigger people to say, hey, not my job, like you were saying. But actually, when they start understanding what it can do for them, they actually find that it takes away some of the less meaningful part of their work, and so they can spend more time on the things that they can see can bring more value to the company. And I think it takes one song to get there, to experiment and explain. It's really a path, but I think that's one of the power of having people build and design the technology themselves on the platform, so that they don't see it as a threat, and they can see how it can change their work.
Yeah, I think one of the ways that we really design the product, and it's a bit of a bet, because I don't think that every team wants to empower their team members as much as they say they do. But making that bet, I think, has also helped sometimes uncover a lot of latent energy where people are really happy to explore and redefine their role. They just needed the tools to express it.
I had some people say, hey, I want to change role and join your team and work on AI. Like, you're in the right team, you're in the perfect place. But maybe we need a new title for this champions, and I think your title is an example of that. I've seen other titles like AI Ops, or there's these new titles popping, and I think it's capturing that energy that people have, and this is a new thing, new mission I want to have inside the company.
And seeing some companies that are looking at AI as a capability that isn't technical, but is really sort of reinventing business with the technology that's available, and then offering roles like you can come in as an analyst or an associate or a manager or a principal, and sort of using the IC ladders that we've seen in engineering or in product, but for the concept of AI, and everybody understanding that it's like, no, you're reinventing the business around you with the understanding of what the technology is. And maybe the last question is reinventing yourselves, because you're two leaders at these companies that have embraced it, are adopting it, and want to be really ambitious. A lot of the people in the room are also reflecting on how they should position themselves to be as effective as possible in the leadership that it requires to move companies forward. How do you describe your role differently? How have you maybe taken on some different stances on topics because of what's going on that you feel is helping you serve the companies you're at in leadership roles?
I think for me, the first thing, just to give you a bit of background, I come from like a more tech background. Like I was doing SRE before, so a lot of hands-on. And I think the first shift that I had to adjust with was to stop thinking only in terms of like implementation, but more in terms of, okay, focus on the business impact, what would be the ROI. Because before that, like any idea you would throw at me, yes, exciting, we can do it, let's do it. But now we see, okay, some might not worth it as much as for the others. So I think the first thing is to keep in mind what problem you're solving and what will be the impact.
Yeah, I think there's really a risk on becoming the AI person for the company. Because when you get in that spot, then, people look at you and it's like, oh, but we don't do that. Why don't we do that? Well, why don't you do it? It's like, so you definitely don't want to get in that seat. And so the way I position myself, I'm trying to make the other people shine when they're having this initiative, either with their team or just themselves. An amplifier, and you want to be the person that enables the other to shine with AI. And I think that's the best place to be, because actually where you bring the most value, you build the tools for others to then get the light. So they appreciate your team, but you're not becoming the bottleneck.
Awesome. All right, last closing statements before we open it to the floor for some questions. Bold prediction on the impact this can actually have on your company in the year to come, so that if we re-invite you next year, you can say we made it, or it's not happened yet.
Tough one.
For me, this internal transformation, what's amazing, it built a lot of empathy for what we do on the product and tech side. So I think it's going to make us stronger as a B2B company, bring the sales, marketing, the community team, the HR team much closer to the core of our mission and what we do and how we do it. So I think that's going to help us actually be a lot more innovative overall and closer together. But I think it's also, the internal spill over into the product and the external. I think my first focus remains the core product. And so it's interesting to see via the use cases people have developed internally, they pitch things for the core product, for the users, for the freelancers. In the UK, with Cursor, someone developed just a page, an external page to simulate taxes. So something fairly simple, static, static data in the back. They did that by themselves, and because they had, just like acculturation. So I think it's going to help us just move much faster and bring more value also externally to the community, the fact that we have more people who can build and propose ideas.
Awesome. Claire, Stéphane, thank you so much. I think some of the things I'm remembering, so putting some guardrails and some messaging, maybe some branding, but giving the playing field and opening it up in a healthy and secure way. The complementarity of the horizontal nature of a platform and some point solutions where you think that the vertical point solutions might be valuable. The phases of deployment, who you need to empower to make it useful, how you identify them, how you make sure you can step in the background to not become a single point of failure, and how they're encouraged to do it. And then that this is just like new table stakes. I think the two recent messages from your respective CEOs about the urgency to really reinvent large portions of the business, both on the product roadmap but also internally, just sort of confirm that that's the bar, and people have to be at it. Really exciting. I hope to hear from all the progress, and if Dusk can be one of the empowering blocks in that journey, which is really our mission, to try and just help leaders and the teams just move as quickly and as positive as possible, it'll be great. So. With that, quick round of applause, and then we'll open it up for questions. So if there are any questions, somebody has a microphone in their hand and is going to run around, which will allow us to record the question for those who might review it later. There's a question over here.
Small one. Thank you for sharing your journey. We are about to start our Dust journey, so very interesting for us. Two questions. One is, did you connect all your internal systems to Dust, or did you do it progressively, or what type of system you are not connecting? And the other one is on ROI. How do you measure it? We are using Cursor, and we are already struggling to measure the productivity gains. So I'd like to understand if you have found ways to measure it properly.
I can take this one. So for us, when we started, we only focus on knowledge data, knowledge base. So Notion, Slack, and stuff. Obviously, all our customer data are not connected to Dust. And to measure ROI for cursor and stuff, like for example, producing code, to do it granularly, it's super hard. But for example, we have like an example where our web team are working on the migration, where they estimated that our code base, like 1 million lines of code, will take that much time to migrate to a new framework. And then leveraging AI assistant and AI agents, they augmented their capabilities. And the way we track it was not super granular, but we did see, for example, a 4x. Things like, okay, before, sometimes super simple low level, like the lines of code in that new repository went from like 50, 100 per day to like 2,000, 4,000. So that's the kind of things that we're looking for.
Yeah.
You're adding more data now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
But you started with knowledge and then increased the scope over time.
So I think it's back to MCP and stuff. One of the things that Claire has highlighted is that you could already connect tools through APIs and stuff. I think what MCP brings, it's essentially like the ecosystem. If one person did it for one tool, then you can leverage it. So for things that are, I would say, out there on the market, like Figma, that's the first one that we tried, or ClickHouse, like for our observability team and stuff, we got it for free. We didn't have to develop the connector. Dust is not supporting them, and it makes sense because not all the companies are using it. So that's the main benefit.
Yeah, very similar, progressive. And on the ROI, I think what's interesting is the pricing is very aligned with how you get value. You know, like there are people who are going to be interacting with the agent, and this is actually very cheap. And then just
when I hear very high ROI, I hear we're too cheap.
No, but if you get a few assistants so I think there's like assistant level ROI, and I think this is to be case by case for customer care. There was this different framework than for product knowledge and for product feedback than for the one for the sales, and then so each assistant, massive assistant at the beginning. This is why initially we went case by case because there's the builder ROI. And the assistant level, and then there is a usage. And if at the usage level with a couple of assistants you get it clearly, then it's more like on the builder side. And again, I think very fast you reach break even with if you want. I think then that's where it translates to how do you govern the different assistants and making sure you kill them, or you have frameworks actually to hold people accountable. I think accountability is a big one. Who builds the assistant, and just making sure that you always have one person accountable for the assistant and its metric. That's part of the design of the right. But I think the break-even is the first 3-6 months, I think.
My hope is that people put in their performance reviews which agents they built at the end of the semester. Like, it's like, I built this agent, it gets 200 people using it every week, and this is how I think I'm making my team happy. It's actually impact that you can sort of pin to pretty quantitative metrics.
Like they would say, build a service in the past.
Yeah, exactly. But people get rewarded for answering the same question 10 times a day in Slack. I think they should get rewarded more for having an agent doing it at their when they're not around.
Yep. When we plug this type of solution, just like Dust, to knowledge bases, just like Notions or Google Drive, it put a spotlight on the quality of the data. And we know that if you are using Notion for at least more than 2 months, then you have dirty stuff inside. How do you deal with this? And in relation with what you just said before, it's not, or I don't know how you do, but it's not the owner or the agent that has to deal with the quality of the data. So how do you deal with this, the quality of the data? Are you selecting the Notion pages that are connected to Dust, or are you taking all the pages and let the AI do the magic?
So we actually tried different things. We hit the same issue as you just described here. Of course, LLMs are not magic. If you have like bad data as an input, you would get like bad answers. First, when we didn't connect the whole knowledge base, we started like with, I would say, we are organizing Notion like per team. Each team has their like workspace kind of. And then the builders who are creating the assistants, they cherry pick which page or which part of the knowledge they have access to, just to minimize the risk of like phishing, like unrelated data. That's the first one. One of the main usage that we see, it's not directly through us actually, it's through the Slack integration, where we have like support channels for different teams and people just like add Dust and then the dedicated assistant for that support function get the answer. And we use system with emojis. It's still human, it's moderation, right? But when people are not happy about the answers, they just put a thumbs down, and then it's the team who owns that channel and that have configured that assistant that will actually go and clean the data and check what happened.
Yeah, so actually when we first implemented Dust, I think Alan already had many use cases, and one of the first companies who really had massive ROI with the platform. So I was like, is it going to work for us? Because we definitely don't have the same level of like return culture and rigor around knowledge base. And actually it proves that it can actually work amazingly in the case where you have a messy Notion plus a messy Google Drive. In our case, this is why I didn't want the tech team to build the assistant. It's actually the owner of the content. Part of the owner, like in the ownership of the assistant, there's going to be someone who is responsible actually to change the Notion or to change the Google Drive. They do select actually the pages to which the assistant should be connected to. And every answer is actually rated by the person interacting with the assistant. And then they review where did they have bad answers and why. And then that's what they use to actually to improve the state of our Notion and documentation. So actually we leverage Dust to help step up our internal knowledge base. Because first I thought maybe we'll just have to invest a lot on up-leveling, but it was a great prioritization framework in the end.
And I think the incentives are pretty clear, and the feedback loop is pretty short. So people get like rewarded for cleaning the data very quickly, because then they deflect most of those workloads. So.
Yeah, now that works with 600, 700 employees. Open question for me at like 4,000, and when the ownership is a bit different.
Yeah, that was the point. I wanted to extend the question about data quality to data privacy. Have you been dealing with customer data or HR data so far?
So customer data, it's a different way we would build. It's really on the product side, and it's a different stack. Although we have a lot of pressure from the non-tech team to build more assistant-like experience on the site with us, and I'm telling them, well, just unless you want to cover this case, even that would make our life easier, but no. Two different stack. HR data is more as a stage of HR knowledge. And this is actually one of the least advanced team, maybe for that reason, so far.
Yeah, we're moving to be a sort of a critical provider or DORA compliant provider with some of our customers, which on some of the customer data cases is obviously one of the additional requirements. I think that in some cases, the ways in which the customer data is accessed or stored is like not necessarily fit for some of the connectors that we built. On support is where I think it's touching the most and has a humongous potential value. So we have some customers that actually use us with customer data in scope. And that's also because they feel that they have the ability to observe and monitor potential PII leaks in channels or in workflows that they hadn't anticipated. Frankly, it's one of the biggest bets that Dust makes with access controls, to just clarify that the future we're getting into has rewritten how data is consumed. Until very recently, you had this model where I'm a human at the company and I either have access to a document or not. And with agents in the picture, some of the scenarios are going to have the mapping of like, who is the agent, who is the human triggering the agent, and who has access to the data. So that authentication problem is a complex, multidimensional one. And it's one of the reasons we haven't released some of the MCPs that we're getting a lot of requests for, because we've heard stories at companies where one engineer signs it up and then everybody's signing pull requests as that same engineer, or everybody's sending emails as the same salesperson and things like that. So it can be pretty powerful, and so with that brings a lot of value. But I think that making authentication pretty observable and pretty easy to simplify around business problems is one of the things we're excited about doing. Like, access control lists have been very privately and centrally held by IT teams in a way that is impossible to understand by the companies that are doing it. So at 5,000 person companies, you have business teams that are like, we're trying to collaborate, and the IT team can't even tell us why we both can't get access to this team. And that's why it's pretty ambitious, but like taking it on and rebuilding it in Dust is the only way that we feel we can recreate the playing field where we would say, we can inherit access from this side and we can recreate access for a project on this side. We have to think about agents now, and so we really have to rebuild from the ground up some of these notions. Maybe time for one more question, if there is one. And obviously there's going to be food and drinks for people to ask all the other questions afterwards.
I have a question for Claire. I was wondering, like, what was the added value of your multi-AI, like, for instance, Slack bot compared to using directly the Dust Slack bot?
There are several. So we built a couple features on top. I wanted to have flexibility, also to plug and play all the tools behind this umbrella, and for that to be, for like the umbrella name to be invisible of all the things we would be building as a platform, like AI platform for the company. Obviously, the main brick is Dust by far, but we're adding some low-code, no-code aspects and some more things in there. And so having this umbrella bot on which we've just built a few like Slack bot features on top of things like the way we automate like the scoring of agents or things like that. Yeah, we could have proposed actually and that, but that's very like specific again to the culture at Malt, where first it was very important to a lot of sensitivity around hallucinations, so putting the ownership on scoring was specific. May not be the case for every company. I think they have different approach to AI and AI assistants. So I'd say that's the main one. It's because we wanted to put our own like culture and principle on how we do it and get the flexibility of adding things to our platform, which is primarily powered by Dust.
Okay, makes sense. So everyone is like used to talk directly with multi-AI compared to Dust. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, again, Claire, Stéphane, thank you so much. The floor's going to be open over there for drinks and enables. And thanks for coming to this summit of the